Violet had been looking forward to her brother's wedding with all her heart. Every Friday, the family had gathered around the dining table, until that day. On the day itself, her stepmother greeted her with a smile, while only 2 place settings were arranged on the table. And with that perfect smile still in place, she whispered quietly. At that moment, the family she had believed in began to crumble with an audible crack. It was the beginning of a woman's cold-blooded plan disguised as love. Friday at 6:45 p.m. Violet Lawrence stepped out of the pharmacy department at the Municipal General Hospital and took a deep breath while gazing at the twilight cityscape. That day, like every day, had been filled with prescription dispensing and medication counseling for patients. The morning was spent on outpatient medication services, the afternoon on preparing medications for inpatients and pharmaceutical management on the wards. For the 29-year-old with 5 years of experience as a pharmacist, safely delivering the right medication to each patient was her most important mission. Drugs have the power to save people. And at the same time, she knew better than anyone the terrifying potential of pharmaceuticals. While driving, Violet's heart felt light. It was the day for her to gather with her entire family for dinner at her father's house. Since losing her mother at age 12, her father Winston had been the most precious person in the world to her. And 5 years ago, after he remarried the elegant and refined Celestine, he started smiling more. When her brother Alexander's wedding was just 1 week away, the entire family was busy with preparations. Her brother, successful as a legal consultant, was going to marry Jasmine, a graphic designer. Both her father and stepmother Celestine were wholeheartedly blessing this union. At least, that's what Violet believed. Her father's mansion was an impressive house in a corner of an upscale residential district. Her father, successful as vice president of a pharmaceutical company, carefully maintained this home filled with memories of her mother. Celestine had also enhanced the beauty of the house without disrupting its atmosphere. Opening the front door, Celestine greeted her as usual. Beautiful beyond her 49 years, she was like a perfect woman who had stepped out of a fashion magazine. Her former expertise as an event planner showed in every aspect of her clothing and behavior. "You've worked hard, Violet." Celestine's voice was, as always, elegant and warm. But today, something felt different. "You're late today. Your father has already finished dinner." Violet checked her wristwatch. Exactly 7 p.m. Sharing dinner at 7 p.m. every Friday had been a family tradition since her mother's death. Her father would always wait until 8 p.m. "Where's Dad?" "He's in his study. But he seems very tired today. His work was apparently quite demanding. Why don't we make it tomorrow?" Celestine's suggestion was superficially full of consideration. However, it somehow felt as though she was trying to avoid letting her meet her father. When Violet turned toward the dining room, her brow furrowed slightly. On the large dining table, only 2 place settings were arranged. Beautiful bone china plates, crystal glasses, silver cutlery. All high-quality items, but set for 2 people, not 3. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were coming suddenly." At Celestine's apologetic words, Violet was confused. Coming every Friday had been decided long ago. It should have been written in both her father's planner and Celestine's schedule book. Why suddenly? But Friday is always. Yes, but lately with your father's health condition, plans often change. Since I'm closest to him, I've been making adjustments as needed. Celestine's explanation was logical. However, somehow an unsettled feeling remained. On her way to the kitchen, Violet's professional instincts kicked in. She noticed a medication case placed on the counter. As a pharmacist, interest in medications was like a conditioned reflex. Inside the transparent plastic case, her father's medications were arranged orderly. Amlodipine for the heart, enalapril for blood pressure. These were medications he had been taking previously. However, several unfamiliar white tablets had been added. Judging from their shape, they were likely psychotropic drugs. Has Dad's medication changed? At Violet's question, Celestine turned around. For an instant, tension seemed to flash across her expression, but she quickly regained her gentle smile. Oh, those? The doctor prescribed them recently. Your dad hasn't been sleeping well. Celestine's explanation was fluent, and someone without medical knowledge would be convinced. However, several questions arose for Violet, the pharmacist. First, her father's primary physician, Dr. Young, was known as a doctor who was cautious about prescribing psychotropic drugs. He would generally refrain from giving medication prescriptions for elderly patients, considering their impact on cognitive function. And most importantly, the physician name written on the medication labels was not Dr. Young's. Multiple unfamiliar doctors' names were listed. Why was he receiving prescriptions from multiple physicians? Which doctor? What did Dr. Young say? Oh, I don't really know the details myself. Your dad talked to the doctors directly and decided on it. Again, Celestine's response contained ambiguity. It was unnatural for Celestine, who was actively involved in her dad's healthcare, to be unaware about the prescribing physician. At that moment, Violet noticed another change. Celestine's way of addressing her dad had changed. Previously she had called him using his name directly, but that day she was calling him your dad all the time. It was a slight change, but somehow it felt like a more distant form of address. Recently, your dad forgets many things. It's terrible. Medication management, schedule management, he can't do anything without me. At his age, I suppose it's inevitable. Violet was surprised to hear what Celestine said. While her father was indeed 57, he was still at an age where he was actively working. As the vice president of a pharmaceutical company, he made important decisions and was a respected figure in the industry. It was hard to believe he had declined to the point of being unable to do anything. What? When I saw him last month, he seemed normal. It progressed rapidly in this past month. The doctor said it might be caused by stress. Violet looked up at the stairs. The second-floor study was like her father's sanctuary. It was a room filled with work documents and photographs with her mother. But that day, no sound whatsoever came from that room. It was dominated by silence, as if no one was there. Just let me say hello to him. No, you shouldn't. He really seems tired. He just took his medication and went to rest. Celestine's restraint was polite but conveyed firm resolve. As if she were intentionally preventing her from meeting with her father. The usually warm atmosphere of the house felt cold that day for some reason. Celestine's unnaturally perfect smile, the inexplicable medication changes, and her dad's abnormal silence. Were these mere coincidences? Or was something major happening to the family? Violet's pharmacist's intuition was sounding alarm bells. However, there was still no concrete evidence. Only a vague anxiety remained in her heart. On Monday morning, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Violet continued thinking about the weekend's events. The unease she had felt at her father's house Friday night had become clearer with time. Her professional instincts as a pharmacist told her something was wrong. On Tuesday evening, she received a call from her brother Alexander. Violet, I want to talk to Dad about the upcoming wedding. Won't you come to the house with me tomorrow? It was unusual for him, who is normally busy as a legal consultant, to be free on a weekday. However, with the wedding just 1 week away, it was understandable that he needed to make final confirmations. Of course. I've been worried about Dad's condition too. His condition? Violet told Alexander about Friday's events. The number of place settings, the medication changes, her dad's abnormal silence. Come to think of it, Dad's phone calls have decreased lately too. He used to contact me 2 to 3 times a week to talk about work-related matters. At Alexander's words, Violet's concerns were growing into conviction. At 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the siblings visited their father's house. This time, his fiancée Jasmine accompanied them as well. Her presence, with her sharp observational skills as a graphic designer, was reassuring. Celestine greeted them at the entrance. She was dressed in her usual perfect attire, but seemed slightly nervous. "Alexander, good to see you today. And welcome back, Jasmine. Your dad is in his study." After waiting in the living room, their father eventually appeared with slow steps. Violet gasped. Although it was only 5 days since she saw him, his appearance had clearly changed. "Dad, are you all right? You don't look well." Winston answered the worried Alexander with a vague expression. "I'm fine. Just a little tired. Celestine is here for me." At that moment, Violet noticed her father's hands trembling slightly. From her experience as a pharmacist, this was likely a side effect of medication. Particularly, it resembled symptoms from long-term use of benzodiazepine drugs. "Celestine, could you tell me more about Dad's medications? As a pharmacist, I'm concerned about drug interactions." Celestine's expression stiffened for an instant. However, she quickly regained her gentle smile. "Oh. The doctors have prescribed them appropriately. You don't need to worry. But we should be more." "Violet." The coldness of Celestine's voice was something Violet had never heard before. "I'm managing your father's health care properly. I don't intend to burden you with it." Everyone sensed the meaning of "it's none of your business" contained in those words. When the conversation moved to the wedding, the sense of unease increased further. At this scale, it will cost quite a bit. At Jasmine's frank opinion, Violet agreed. Considering Dad's condition, wouldn't holding it in a smaller scale be better? "I don't think we need to push ourselves." "Violet." Celestine's voice became clearly intimidating. "Let's respect your dad's wishes. This wedding is something he truly wishes to happen. Since I'm closest to him, I understand his true feelings. But Dad is. I know him best. You only come once a week, don't you? I'm by his side 24 hours a day, 365 days a year." Celestine's words were factual, but somehow they felt like an intention to exclude the family. As if she were claiming exclusive rights to their father. At that moment, Winston opened his heavy mouth. "Yes. Celestine is right." However, there was no conviction in his eyes. His gaze was drifting in the air as if he didn't believe his own words. The previous him would have clearly stated his own opinion. The man who had constantly made clear decisions as an executive of a pharmaceutical company had become someone who merely followed others' opinions. Alexander looked into Violet's eyes. An unspoken doubt ran between the siblings. Something was decisively wrong. However, what it was remained without confirmation. "Dad, I heard your medication has increased recently. How is your health?" Jasmine's question was based on the delicate observation characteristic of a designer. "Medication? Oh, yes. Celestine manages it for me." His response was vague, and he seemed unaware of what medications he was taking. This was clearly abnormal. There was no way her father, an executive at a pharmaceutical company, would be indifferent about his own medications. On the way home, Violet happened to meet Mrs. Harton from the neighboring house. This woman in her 80s was a longtime resident who had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years. "Oh, Violet dear. It's been so long." "Mrs. Harton, good evening. I haven't seen your father lately. He used to take morning walks regularly." Violet's heart began to race. Her father had a habit of taking 30-minute walks every morning at 6 a.m. He was recommended to do so by his doctor for heart disease prevention and health maintenance. Walks? When did you stop seeing him? Well, about a month ago, I'd say. Celestine takes such good care of him that he rarely goes out alone anymore. At Mrs. Harton's words, Violet was stunned. Her father's walking habit had suddenly stopped at the same time as the medication changes. But I think walking is necessary for his health. I think so too, but Celestine says she's worried about him falling. Indeed, your father looks unsteady lately. Unsteady. That was a typical side effect of psychotropic drugs. Violet's knowledge as a pharmacist began putting together the puzzle pieces. New medication prescriptions, progressing forgetfulness, cessation of walking habits, hand tremors, unsteadiness, and isolation from family. Could these symptoms indicate intentional cognitive decline caused by drugs? But could such a horrible thing really be possible? Celestine claimed to love her father and was playing the perfect wife. Or was that very thing an act? In the car, Alexander spoke up. Violet, Dad's condition today was clearly strange, wasn't it? Yes. Even from a pharmacist's perspective, those symptoms weren't normal. Jasmine agreed as well. There was something unsettling about Celestine's attitude. It was like she was trying to distance us from Dad. Heavy silence flowed between the three. Something was happening within the family. And it might be dangerous for their father. However, there was still no evidence. Only speculation and suspicion weighed heavy on their hearts. Violet couldn't sleep on Thursday night. Her father's changes, Celestine's unnatural attitude, and the premonition of danger her pharmacist's intuition told her. All the pieces were vaguely visible, yet there was no decisive evidence. However, there were only 3 days left until the wedding. If danger was really approaching her father, she had to act immediately. Violet made her decision on Friday afternoon. She would visit her father's house during the time Celestine went to the fitness club she attended once a week. She needed to investigate her father's medications in detail to confirm the truth. She arrived at her father's house at 2 p.m. He was in his study, and Celestine was out as scheduled. "Hi, Dad. It's me, Violet." When she knocked and entered the study door, Winston was sitting vaguely in front of his desk. He would have been concentrating on work at this time usually, but he wasn't doing anything then. "Oh, Violet, what day is it today?" Violet's heart sank hearing his words. He was losing his sense of time. This was clearly drug-induced cognitive decline. "Dad, could you show me the medications you're taking? As a pharmacist, I want to check them properly." "Medications?" "Celestine manages them. I don't know where they are." He didn't even know where his own medications were kept. She hadn't realized the situation had become this serious. "Dad, rest a little. I'll make some tea." Leaving the study, Violet headed to Celestine's room. The place that had once been her mother's room was completely under Celestine's control. While feeling guilty, she told herself this was a necessary action to protect her family. When she opened the dresser drawer in the bedroom, she found a large quantity of medications hidden there. Violet's blood ran cold. Lorazepam anti-anxiety medication, zolpidem sleeping pills, risperidone antipsychotic, and flunitrazepam. The moment she saw the name of the last drug, Violet's hands trembled. Flunitrazepam was a drug commonly known as a date rape drug. It had the effect of making memories vague and robbing judgment. Moreover, all these medications were prescribed by different doctors. It was evidence of intentionally combining drugs to manipulate her father's mental functions. Furthermore, what emerged from the back of the drawer were multiple drafts of wills. There were multiple versions with different dates, all stating, "I bequeath all my assets to Celestine Montgomery." And most shocking was Celestine's handwritten memo. Winston's response is still slow. Increase lorazepam from 3 to 4 tablets daily. Mix 0.5 mg flunitrazepam into after-dinner coffee. More knowledgeable than previous target, need to proceed carefully. Violet was horrified. The phrase, previous target, meant Celestine had committed the same crime before. Her father was the victim of a planned drug crime. With trembling hands, Violet photographed the evidence with her cell phone. Pictures of the drugs, drafts of wills, and all of the incriminating memos. At that moment, she heard the front door opening downstairs. Celestine had returned earlier than scheduled. "I'm home." Violet could hear Celestine's voice. She hurriedly returned the evidence to its original position and tried to leave the room. However, she encountered Celestine halfway down the stairs. "Oh, Violet. What brings you here today?" Celestine's expression was her usual perfect smile. However, sharp wariness dwelt in her eyes. "I came to check on Dad. We were just talking." "I see. But he seems tired, so you shouldn't stay too long." Celestine, who had come upstairs, stopped in front of her own room. The door was slightly open. She might have noticed that Violet had entered. "Wait a moment." When Celestine entered the room and came out after a while, her expression had completely changed. The perfect mask had fallen away, revealing her cold true nature. "What were you doing in my room?" "Nothing. I was just worried about Dad." "Don't lie to me. You opened my drawer, didn't you?" Celestine approached step by step. Her elegant atmosphere had vanished, making her seem like a different person. "You found it, didn't you, you pharmacist?" Celestine's voice took on a demonic low tone. "But being too clever is problematic. Perhaps you should become a bit more docile, like your dad." Celestine took out a small bottle from the bedroom. It contained a clear liquid. "You know what this is, being a pharmacist, don't you? Colorless and odorless, undetectable when mixed into coffee or tea. Your father drinks it deliciously every day." Violet's heart pounded violently. It was a liquid form of flunitrazepam. "Why are you doing this?" "Why?" "Money, obviously. Your father, as the vice president of a pharmaceutical company, has considerable assets. Real estate, stocks, retirement funds, life insurance, altogether it's worth millions of dollars." Celestine's eyes gleamed with greed. "I've received assets from my previous husband and the man before him using the same method. With drugs, anyone can be easily controlled. Your dad resisted at first, but now he's completely under my control." Fear and anger swirled within Violet. "And after tomorrow's wedding is over?" Celestine showed an evil smile. "He will take some stronger medication. Accidental death from sleeping pill overdose. It's a common story, isn't it? Then all of his assets will become mine. You siblings won't get anything, but don't worry. You'll be able to join your dad soon." Celestine opened the bottle. "Now, drink this. As a pharmacist, you understand that resistance is futile, don't you?" In this desperate situation, Violet had to fully utilize her knowledge as a pharmacist. However, her opponent was a calculated serial killer. How could she possibly escape from this demonic woman? In the desperate situation, Violet tried to regain her composure as a pharmacist. The contents of the bottle Celestine was holding were certainly dangerous drugs. However, as a pharmacist, she possessed knowledge her opponent didn't have. "Wait," Violet said calmly. "That drug won't take effect immediately, will it? At least tell me in detail why you're doing this. As a pharmacist, I'm interested in your methods." A momentary look of superiority appeared on Celestine's face. The desire to boast about her crimes overcame her wariness. Indeed. Since I'll be silencing you soon anyway, I might as well tell you. In that gap, Violet observed the coffee cup on the desk. There was white powder residue at the bottom. As expected, drugs were routinely mixed into her father's coffee. My first target was my ex-husband 5 years ago. He was a pharmaceutical company researcher, and I learned about drugs from him. Then, using that knowledge, Celestine showed an evil smile. I gradually made him drug dependent over 2 years, and finally killed him disguised as suicide. It was the perfect crime. Violet had secretly activated her phone's recording function. This confession would be decisive evidence. Your dad is my third target. I approached him using his position as a pharmaceutical company executive. I met him at a work party, playing the elegant widow. While listening to Celestine's confession, Violet was looking for an opportunity to escape. I've heard enough. Now, drink this. However, at that moment, her father's voice could be heard from downstairs. Celestine? Violet? Where are you? The sound of Winston coming up the stairs could be heard. Just when Celestine's attention was diverted, Violet burst out of the room. Dad, it's dangerous. Get away from Celestine. In the confusion, Violet succeeded in escaping from the house. Though her hands were trembling in the car, she first called her brother Alexander. Alexander, I've discovered something terrible. Celestine is manipulating Dad with drugs. It's attempted murder. What? Where are you now? I left the house and I'm heading to the hospital now. I need to collect evidence and have it analyzed by experts. 30 minutes later, Violet was at the hospital. She had urgently contacted Professor Harrison, a toxicology expert, and Dr. Madison, a forensic medicine specialist. This combination of drugs is clearly abnormal, Professor Harrison said with a serious expression after looking at the photographs she had taken. The combination of lorazepam, flunitrazepam, and risperidone severely impairs cognitive function and robs judgment. Long-term use could cause irreversible brain damage. Dr. Madison agreed. This is clearly an intentional drug-induced crime. We should notify the police immediately. However, Violet had a different plan. I want to reveal the truth in front of everyone at tomorrow's wedding. By exposing this crime at a place where many pharmaceutical industry professionals gather, we can impose greater social sanctions. That night, Violet, Alexander, and Jasmine held an emergency meeting. I contacted the police, but they haven't issued an arrest warrant yet. They said the evidence was too circumstantial, Alexander reported, causing Violet to grit her teeth. But I have the recorded audio of her confession. This should be decisive. The problem is whether Celestine might do something to Dad before tomorrow, Jasmine said worriedly, and the three fell silent. At that moment, an unexpected ally contacted them. They received a phone call from Aurora Pendleton, an acquaintance of Celestine. Miss Violet, could we meet? There's something I need to tell you about Celestine. An hour later, the three were meeting with Aurora at a nearby cafe. The 51-year-old real estate agent was clearly suffering from guilt. I've been blackmailed by Celestine for a long time. She knew about a small irregularity in my real estate transactions and used that to force my cooperation. Aurora's testimony was shocking. Celestine has done this before. Her first husband, second lover, and now your father. She's used the same methods to manipulate people with drugs and steal assets from all of them. Among the evidence she brought were records of Celestine's past crimes. Multiple marriages under false names, drug purchase records, and newspaper articles about the suspicious deaths of victims. This is perfect. Violet's resolve was firm when her phone rang. It was from Celestine. Violet. Today was fun, wasn't it? A demonic laugh could be heard from the other end of the phone. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's wedding. Your father is very excited about it too. Well, tomorrow might be his last enjoyable day. If you do anything to him, don't worry. I won't do anything until tomorrow. But in return, you must properly attend tomorrow's wedding. And don't say anything unnecessary. Understood? After the call ended, the four looked at each other. She's holding him hostage, Alexander said bitterly. But we have evidence. Tomorrow, let's reveal the truth in front of everyone and rescue him. Violet's determination was firm. As a pharmacist, as a daughter, and as a human being who loves justice, she had to stop this demonic woman. The next morning, wedding preparations began. However, this day wasn't just a wedding. It would become the stage for the final battle between justice and evil. Violet concealed her recording equipment in her breast pocket, Alexander organized legal evidence, and Jasmine and Aurora stood by as witnesses. Celestine didn't know. She didn't know that the crime she thought was perfect would be completely exposed by a pharmacist's expertise and the bonds of a family. The time for revenge had come. But this wasn't revenge. This was the realization of justice. On the morning of the wedding day, 200 guests had gathered in the luxurious grand hall of the Riverside Hotel. It was an impressive lineup that reflected Winston's connections. Pharmaceutical company executives, doctors, pharmacists, and local dignitaries. For Celestine, this should have been the perfect stage. However, that day would become the worst day of her life. Celestine was dressed in a perfect lavender dress, greeting guests with her usual elegant smile. However, Violet could see the tension hidden beneath that smile. Even after the previous day's events, this woman was still continuing her act. Meanwhile, Winston's condition was painful to watch. He walked unsteadily due to the drug effects and occasionally showed vague expressions. Still, for his son's wedding, he was desperately trying to maintain consciousness. "Dad, are you all right?" When Violet called out, Winston looked at his daughter and tilted his head. "You are..." Seeing her father unable to even remember his own daughter's name, Violet's determination grew stronger. At 2 p.m., the wedding ceremony began. Alexander and Jasmine stood before the altar, exchanging beautiful vows. Normally it would have been a moving moment, but knowing what was about to happen, Violet's heart was conflicted. The officiant announced, "We will now hear words from the families of the bride and groom." Alexander took the microphone and stepped onto the platform. "Everyone, thank you for attending our wedding today." Amid warm applause, Alexander's expression suddenly became serious. "However, before the celebration, there is something we must tell you all. About an unbelievable event happening in our family." The venue began to murmur. Not knowing what was happening, the guests were confused. "Please listen to my sister Violet about an important discovery." Violet stood up, holding recording equipment, and headed to the platform. She could see Celestine's face turning pale. "Everyone, I am Violet Lawrence, a pharmacist. Today, I will tell you the truth about a terrible crime targeting our family. Our stepmother, Celestine Montgomery, has been manipulating my dad with drugs, trying to steal all his assets." The venue was enveloped in silence. Everyone was holding their breath. Celestine suddenly stood up. Her perfect smile disappeared, showing signs of panic. "What are you saying? That's a misunderstanding." However, Violet calmly continued. "I have evidence. First, please listen to Celestine's own confession." When she pressed the switch on the recording device, Celestine's voice echoed through the venue. "With drugs, anyone can be easily controlled. Your dad is now completely under my control. I've received assets from my previous husband and the man before him using the same method. The venue erupted into chaos. The guests stared at Celestine with expressions of disbelief. Celestine's face turned ashen. She desperately tried to deny it, but her own voice was flowing as evidence. This is edited recording. It's a lie. Her voice cracked, and her usual elegance completely vanished. There's more evidence. Violet showed her smartphone screen to the guests. It was a photo of Celestine's handwritten memo. Winston's response is still slow. Need to increase the medication dose. This is Celestine's memo. The atmosphere in the venue froze. Pharmaceutical company executives began standing up. Such drug crimes are unforgivable. This is an act that damages our industry's credibility. Amid the angry voices of executives, Celestine was completely isolated. At that moment, Aurora Pendleton stood up. Everyone, I too am a victim of Celestine. I've been blackmailed by her for a long time. Aurora's voice trembled but was filled with determination. Celestine found a small mistake in my real estate transactions and used that to blackmail me. She forced me to cooperate in her crimes. As the venue fell silent, Aurora continued. She told me, you're an accomplice too. If you go to the police, you'll be arrested as well. Aurora took documents from her bag. But I can no longer remain silent. This is the evidence of her previous crimes. Holding up the documents, Aurora's voice grew stronger. This is the death certificate of Celestine's previous husband, Richard Hamilton. The cause of death is listed as accidental death from sleeping pill overdose. But this wasn't an accident. The venue murmured. Richard had exactly the same symptoms as Winston now. Severe forgetfulness, unsteadiness, and finally, tears welled up in Aurora's eyes. I saw it. Celestine mixing white powder into Richard's coffee. But I was too scared to stop her. And 2 months later, Richard died. Celestine's face turned ashen. Stop it. That's a lie. You're confused. However, Aurora continued. Furthermore, her previous lover, Michael Thompson, was the same. He became ill after starting to date Celestine and finally died falling downstairs. But that wasn't an accident either. Aurora showed another document. This is a list of fake names Celestine used. She used multiple identities to repeatedly commit marriage fraud. Stop it already. Celestine screamed shrilly. You're a liar. You've been bought with money. However, Aurora answered resolutely. I no longer fear you. By telling the truth, I can finally be free. Celestine's eyes darted desperately. There was no escape anymore. Stop it. Stop it. Celestine screamed shrilly. The elegant woman was no longer there. I haven't done anything wrong. I only love Winston. However, the guest's eyes were cold. Before so much evidence, no excuse would work. Violet stood in front of Celestine. Love? The only thing you loved was money. You drugged Dad and tried to separate our family. Please, believe me. I really. Celestine tried to cling to her while crying, but Violet stepped back. It's over. Your acting no longer works. At that moment, police officers entered through the venue entrance. Celestine Montgomery, you're under arrest for drug-induced assault and attempted murder. As the police approached, Celestine completely lost control. No. I haven't done anything. This is all lies. While being handcuffed, Celestine made her final disgraceful display. Winston. Help me. Our love is real, isn't it? However, her father, still under the influence of drugs, looked at Celestine with a confused expression. Though his head was foggy from the drug effects, he seemed to understand from the atmosphere that something bad was happening. Celestine. You are. Winston cut off his words and showed a puzzled expression. Due to memory confusion from the drugs, he couldn't fully grasp the situation. You believe me. These people are lying. Celestine desperately tried to cling to him, but the police officers restrained her. Are you satisfied ruining this wedding? Celestine made her last desperate attempt, but no one paid attention anymore. You're the one who ruined it. You ruined Dad's life and our family. Violet's words quietly echoed through the venue. Celestine was then led away by police. Her perfect dress was disheveled, her makeup ruined by tears, no longer containing a trace of beauty. It was the moment she fell from being an elegant stepmother to a pitiful criminal. When Celestine disappeared from the venue, the atmosphere completely changed. Warm applause erupted from the guests. Winston, as the drug fog began to clear, climbed unsteadily onto the platform. Everyone. I was deceived for a long time. Light returned to Winston's eyes for the first time in a while. If my children hadn't revealed the truth, I would have. He embraced Violet and Alexander while crying. Thank you. Thank you so much. At the moment when they embraced each other as a family, the venue was filled with emotion. Jasmine also said through tears, I'm honored to become part of such a wonderful family. The officiant stepped forward. Now, let us continue with the wedding ceremony. This time, it truly became a wedding filled with real love and blessings. The demonic woman was gone, leaving only family love and truth. 6 months later, in autumn, Violet finished her shift at the hospital at 6 p.m. and headed to her father's house. In addition to her daily duties as a pharmacist, she had recently begun giving lectures on drug crime prevention. The Celestine case had shocked the industry, bringing renewed recognition to the importance of drug management. Arriving at her father's house, 3 pairs of shoes were neatly arranged at the entrance. Her father's leather shoes, Alexander's black business shoes, and Jasmine's small pumps. Like before, the Friday scene of family gathering for dinner had returned. I'm home, Violet called out at the entrance, and her father's bright voice returned from the kitchen. Welcome back, Violet. You're a bit early today. Through 6 months of treatment and rehabilitation, Winston's cognitive function had significantly improved. While not completely back to normal, there was no impediment to daily life, and he had returned to work. Some effects of the drugs on his brain remained, but according to his doctor, further recovery could certainly be expected. Heading to the dining room, the aroma of warm home cooking filled the air. 4 place settings were beautifully arranged on the table. Unlike with Celestine before, now the family cooked and prepared meals together as part of their daily routine. Welcome back, Violet. Alexander was preparing food with his wife Jasmine. 6 months into their marriage, their relationship seemed to have deepened further. Today we have Jasmine's homemade roast beef. She's really improved her skills. Jasmine laughed shyly. I practiced for our family. The word family came naturally from her mouth. The tense atmosphere from when Celestine was there had completely disappeared, and true family warmth filled the house. What their father held was a medication case he managed himself. It only contained heart and blood pressure medications, all of which had been checked thoroughly by Violet. It was a transparent relationship based on trust. Have you taken today's medication already? Of course. I followed the checklist you made for me. Winston smiled while showing the medication case. There were no signs of the previous confusion or anxiety. While gathered around the dinner table, the family reported on each other's recent situations. Alexander had been assigned a new project, and Jasmine was steadily building her career as a freelance designer. And Winston, in addition to his work at the pharmaceutical company, had begun participating in drug crime prevention awareness activities. Speaking of which, Celestine's sentence was finalized. Alexander brought up the topic. 15 years for attempted murder, fraud, and pharmaceutical law violations. Aurora's testimony was decisive. Aurora Pendleton had courageously taken the witness stand and testified in detail about Celestine's past crimes. Her testimony led to the deaths of Celestine's former husband and lover being prosecuted as murders, achieving justice. "We can never thank Aurora enough," Violet said. Without her, Celestine's past crimes might have remained buried in darkness. Winston nodded deeply. She was truly brave. Despite being blackmailed, she ultimately chose what was right. After dinner, the family spent relaxed time in the living room drinking coffee. They sometimes watched TV, but that day they simply enjoyed conversation. Violet noticed the vase by the window. White roses were beautifully arranged. "These are the flowers Mother loved." "Yes. Jasmine buys them every week for us." Winston's eyes narrowed gently. "When Celestine was here, I couldn't even use this vase. But now, I look at these flowers every day while remembering your mother." An environment where they could cherish their mother's memory had returned. Celestine had intentionally tried to erase their mother's presence, but now their mother's photos and flowers existed naturally throughout the house. After 9 p.m., Alexander and Jasmine began preparing to go home. "We'll come again next Friday. I'm looking forward to it." "When you're here, the house truly becomes bright," Winston said from his heart. While Violet prepared to leave, she looked around the house once more. All traces of Celestine had completely disappeared. All the decorative items she had brought were disposed of, and the warm furniture from their mother's time was arranged again. When saying goodbye to her father at the entrance, he quietly said, "Violet, thank you so much. Without you, I would have been. Dad, that's over now. What matters is that we're together now, right?" He nodded deeply. "You're right. Being saved by you all, I've come to understand anew the importance of true family." On the drive home, Violet looked up at the sky. Stars shone beautifully in the autumn night sky. As a pharmacist, as a daughter, and as a human being, she had learned many things. The terror of drugs, the strength of family bonds, and the importance of the courage to reveal truth. The nightmare called Celestine Montgomery was over. And peaceful, warm days had returned to the Lawrence family. Sometimes, the darkest moments can open doors to the brightest futures. Violet truly understands this now. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who care for each other, protect each other, and share truth with each other. And those bonds can never be defeated by any hardship.